I'm 28 years old and I'm from the United States. I hope you'll stay with me until the end of this story, because what I'm about to share isn't just about death or loss. It's about something hidden, something my father kept buried in silence for decades. And what I found inside his old Bible changed not just how I saw him, but how I saw myself. So please, listen until the very end. My father's name was Ronald, a quiet man. Stern, the kind who didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened. He wasn't the most affectionate, he didn't give long speeches or tell bedtime stories, but he showed up every time. Baseball games, late night science projects, job interviews, he was there. But then came the cancer. Fast, aggressive, cruel. It stripped him down in months. My two older siblings, David and Lisa, they couldn't handle it. At least, that's what they said. David lived just 40 minutes away, but only visited once. Lisa came with her husband the first week, cried in the hallway, and then disappeared. They both stopped answering my calls eventually, so it was just me. I moved into his hospice room, a small beige space that smelled like sanitizer and slow decay. I watched a strong man melt into someone who couldn't hold a fork. I cleaned him, fed him, read to him, and every night, before falling asleep, he held his Bible against his chest, same one he'd had since I was a child. I never asked him why, but I should have. The night he died was quiet. It was raining outside, soft, steady, almost like a lullaby. He looked at me one last time, touched my wrist, and said, "Don't be angry at them, but don't forget who stayed." Those were his last words. After he passed, the hospice nurse handed me a box of his belongings, a framed photo of our family from 1997, his reading glasses, and that old Bible. It was falling apart at the edges. Underlined verses, torn corners, coffee stains. I almost left it in the box, but something told me not to. At home, I sat on my bed, opened it, and something slid out. An envelope, sealed, my name on the front. Bobby. My heart stopped. Inside were two items, a letter, and a small faded photo of a woman I'd never seen before. She looked young, maybe in her 20s, with dark hair and sad eyes. The letter began, "Son, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I never told you what I should have, but some truths feel heavier when spoken out loud." He went on to describe something I never expected. Before he married my mother, he was engaged to another woman. Her name was Clara. They were young, in love. But just 2 months before their wedding, she disappeared, vanished from his life without a word. For years, he searched, asked questions. No one knew what happened, or so he thought. Until a letter arrived in the mail 5 years later. A letter from Clara's sister. It said Clara had died during childbirth, and the child was his. My father had a daughter, born in secret, raised in another city. He never met her, never held her, but he never forgot her either. He wrote, "I didn't know how to explain it. When I met your mother, I was still broken, but she brought me back. And when you were born, Bobby, I told myself this was my second chance, to be better, to be whole. But a part of me always wondered if you had a sister somewhere out there, feeling abandoned, just like I once felt when Clara left." I sat there, stunned. A sister, all these years, and he never said a word? The letter ended with something that still echoes in my head. "If you choose to search for her, do it with love, not guilt, not obligation, but because I believe she deserves to know the truth too. And if you never find her, promise me you'll forgive me anyway. I wasn't the best man, but I tried to be the best father I could for the children I could reach." The next morning, I flipped back through the Bible. There were notes, clues. He had written names in the margins, cities, dates. There was a list of orphanages, a hospital in Alabama, a faded receipt from a flower shop in Tulsa where he used to send lilies every May. All this time, he had been looking, on his own. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've followed every lead. I've called strangers, traced hospital records, traveled to 3 states, and 2 weeks ago, I got a call from a woman named Marie. She said, "I think I might be the person your dad wrote about." We're still talking, carefully, slowly. No expectations, just curiosity and maybe a little hope. I don't know where this path leads. Maybe it ends in healing. Maybe it ends in heartbreak. But I know this. I'm glad I stayed, because if I hadn't, I never would have found the truth buried in silence. I never would have known the man my father really was. And I never would have found the sister I never knew I had. Season 2, I found my secret sister. but she wasn't who I expected. Hi again. If you've made it this far, thank you. My name is Bobby, 28 from the US. And if you remember the story about my father's old Bible and the letter he left me, then you'll understand why what happened next was both beautiful and terrifying. Because I thought the hard part was over. Turns out it was just beginning. Act 1, the first call with Marie. Marie and I talked for almost 2 hours that first night. Her voice was calm, steady, but I could hear something behind it: nervousness, doubt. Maybe I had it too. She told me she had found a box of letters after her adoptive mother passed away. Letters from a man named Ronald. My father. They were never sent, just kept, folded carefully, all signed with a name she didn't recognize until she stumbled across my story in a Facebook group someone had posted. She said, "I think he might be my father, and I think you might be my brother." I felt everything at once: hope, panic, sadness, guilt. How do you even begin to respond to something like that? So I just said the first thing that came to my heart: if it's true, Marie, then we've both been lost for a very long time. We agreed to take a DNA test. No pressure, no expectations. 2 weeks later, the results came back. 99.9% match, half siblings. My father had been right. He did have a daughter out there. But here's the part that still makes my skin crawl. Marie already knew she was adopted, but she didn't know why until one of the letters mentioned a trust fund. Something small, nothing extravagant, but it had been set aside in her name. She checked. It existed. My dad had been secretly funding it through a friend's account since 1997. My father had been there all along, watching, helping from the shadows. But here's where things got complicated. Agate 3, the journal. Marie had also found a journal, not from my dad, from her adoptive mother, and what she wrote inside it changed everything. It turns out Clara, the woman who was engaged to my dad before marrying my mom, hadn't died during childbirth like he believed. She left. She ran, not out of fear, but because someone threatened her. Someone told her to disappear, that her life would be ruined if she stayed. And that person was my grandfather, my dad's father, a man I never knew, a man who died before I was born. He didn't approve of Clara, thought she was beneath their family, and he made sure she disappeared, permanently. My father had spent his whole life believing she died. He never knew the truth, and now neither of them could ever speak again. I told Lisa and David. They didn't take it well. David was furious. He said I was chasing ghosts, that I was digging up pain for nothing. But Lisa, she broke down. She said, "I wish he told us. I wish we knew who he really was." Then my siblings weren't just angry. They were ashamed they hadn't been there for him like I was. And honestly, so was I. Oh, was I. A month later, Marie and I met in person. She looked nothing like me, but when she smiled, I saw him. I saw him. That awkward, crooked grin. The same one he had when he tried to fix a broken chair with duct tape and hope. She handed me a letter, one she had never opened. It was addressed to her from my dad. It said, "If someday you find this, I want you to know, I never stopped loving you. Not a day went by that I didn't wonder if you were okay. I didn't raise you, but I carried you with me. I hope you forgive me, and I hope your life has been beautiful, even if mine had a hole I never got to fill." Marie cried. I did too. We didn't hug right away. We just sat side by side like siblings who had been separated by time, but not by blood. Today, Marie is part of my life. We talk often. Not every day, not perfect, but enough. Enough to rebuild something that was lost before we were even born. And every time I pass by my dad's Bible on the shelf, I think of how easily it could have stayed closed, how close I came to missing it all. But I didn't, because I stayed. And in doing so, I found the truth. I found my sister. And I found the man my father really was. Not in the hospital bed where he died, but in the silence he left behind, waiting to be heard. Hi again. Thank you for staying with me this far. I'm Bobby. I'm 28 from the United States, and just when I thought I had finally uncovered all the secrets my father left behind, life handed me one more truth I wasn't ready for. When I found out I had a secret sister, Marie, it felt like something in the world finally made sense, like I had filled a missing space inside me that I didn't know was hollow. But what I didn't expect was that her existence wasn't the deepest secret at all. It started with a simple brown envelope. Marie received it in the mail 2 months after we connected. There was no return address, just her name typed neatly on the front. Inside was a death certificate for a woman named Clara Mason. That name, it wasn't unfamiliar. Clara was my dad's ex-fiancée before he met my mom. He believed she had died during childbirth, the same childbirth that brought Marie into the world. But the date on the certificate, it was from just last year. That didn't make sense. If Clara died just last year, then who raised Marie? Why was she told her mother died the day she was born? And most importantly, why had my father believed that lie all these years? Marie was quiet for a while after reading it. Then she looked at me and said, "I think my mom might have faked her death." I didn't want to believe it. But the more we looked, the stranger things got. We pulled court records, hospital documents, and even requested Marie's original sealed birth certificate. It took weeks and a court petition, but when the file finally arrived, it confirmed it. Clara Mason was listed as the mother. The father? Unknown. There was also a nurse's note scribbled in the margins. Child transferred to private guardian, mother not present at discharge. So Clara hadn't died. She had given birth and vanished. Marie remembered a photograph she had found as a teenager. A woman in dark sunglasses standing next to an old car. She always thought it was her adoptive mother when she was young. But when she showed it to me, my heart dropped. I recognized that woman immediately. I had seen her before, years ago, on a torn photo my father kept hidden in a drawer. She had a scar under her left jaw. Same woman, same eyes, same expression. It was Clara, alive, still lingering around the edges of Marie's life. We started digging deeper. Hotel records, rental agreements, fake names. One motel owner in Kansas remembered her. He said, "Yeah, she always asked for a room near the back exit, paid in cash, sometimes came with a little girl." Marie's hands trembled. That girl might have been her. Back home, I looked again inside my dad's old Bible. In the very back, behind the last page, was a folded scrap of newspaper. It was an obituary for a woman named Margaret Benson. It said she was survived by her sister, CM, and the city matched the place where Marie was born. It hit us. Clara didn't vanish randomly. She changed her name. She became someone else. She lived in hiding, watching from a distance. And then came the card. We returned to the flower shop where Dad used to send lilies every year in May. The owner, an older woman, still remembered him. She said he'd come in, order lilies, and ask that they be delivered anonymously. One year he left behind a small white envelope. She had kept it for years in a drawer, unsure what to do with it. She handed it to us. It was addressed to the woman I never stopped waiting for. Inside was one single sentence, written in my dad's shaky handwriting. "I forgive you. Even if I never understand, if our daughter ever finds you, tell her I was always ready to love her." Marie couldn't stop crying. She never got to meet her mother, never got to ask the questions that haunted her. And the woman who brought her into this world died with the truth still locked away. But my father, he had forgiven Clara, even in her silence, even in her absence. And now somehow Marie had to learn how to do the same. Today we speak often. Not every day, but when we do, it's real. She's no longer my half-sister. She's simply my sister. And when I see her laugh or pause before she speaks, there are moments when it's like my dad is right there between us. Not in body, but in spirit. The Bible still sits on my shelf. I open it sometimes, not because I expect to find more secrets, but because I want to remember the man who tried so hard to do right by the people he loved, even when the past wouldn't let him rest. This story didn't end in some perfect reunion, but it gave us something even more powerful, a shared truth. And in that truth, we found something greater than answers. We found peace. We thought the truth ended when we found out Clara had changed her name and vanished. We thought we had pieced together the past. But the truth is, secrets don't die just because someone does. They linger, and sometimes they wait in the most ordinary places. It began the day Marie moved into her new apartment. After everything we'd been through, she decided it was time to leave the house she grew up in, the one her adoptive mother had left her in the will. It was too full of ghosts, she said. So we helped her pack old furniture, boxes of clothes, random kitchen junk. Then she opened the hallway closet. Inside, tucked behind a shoebox full of dusty VHS tapes, was something she hadn't noticed before. A wooden box, sealed, no key. It wasn't heavy, but it felt important. We tried opening it with a flathead screwdriver. The latch snapped. Inside was a leather-bound journal, thick, aged. On the first page, in cursive handwriting that looked fragile as spider silk, it read, "To my daughter, if you ever find this, it means the past finally caught up to me." It was Clara's journal. Marie sat down on the floor. Her hands shook. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she opened to the second page and began to read. Clara wrote everything about growing up poor, meeting our father, falling in love with him, how she was thrilled to marry him until the Benson family got involved. That's when things turned dark. She described threats, a strange man who showed up at her workplace warning her to stay away. Letters she received unsigned, saying if she stayed with Ronald, he'd lose everything. The name Benson carried weight back then. His father had friends in government, in banks, even the police. And then she became pregnant. She was terrified, not of the baby, but of what they'd do if she stayed. She left Ronald without a word, hid in another city. But after giving birth, something worse happened. She was manipulated into giving Marie up. Not by poverty, not by fear, but by a woman named Judith, her older cousin who worked at a private adoption agency. Judith promised safety, anonymity, and a new start. What Clara didn't know was that Judith had sold Marie's adoption file to a wealthy couple under a false name. That couple, Marie's adoptive parents. Marie's entire life had been based on a lie wrapped in paperwork. Clara had spent years trying to get Marie back. She wrote letters, filed requests, even tried to confront Judith. But the agency shut down in 1999. Judith vanished, and Clara gave up hope. But she never stopped writing. Every page of that journal was a plea, an apology, a record of a mother who had been silenced, manipulated, and buried in shame. We read for hours. By the end, Marie couldn't speak. Her face was blank, but her hands were clenched like she was holding on to the last thread of something too sacred to drop. And I felt anger rising inside me. Not at Clara, not at Marie. At the system, at my grandfather, at Judith, at the silence that had robbed us of something we could have had decades ago. But then Marie whispered something I'll never forget. She said, she was fighting for me the whole time. That was the moment everything shifted. We weren't just piecing together the past anymore. We were rewriting it. The next morning, we scanned every page. We stored the original in a fireproof safe. And then we did what we never thought we would. We decided to find Judith. If she was alive, she owed us answers. If she wasn't, we owed it to ourselves to close the chapter with the truth. What came next would uncover more than just a missing woman. It would reveal how many lives had been manipulated for profit, and who else had known about it, including someone I trusted. We started with a journal, and we ended up in a city we'd never planned to visit, Toledo, Ohio. That's where we found her. Judith. Not in some gated mansion or hidden away under an alias. She was living in a small house, alone, mid-70s, gray hair, sharp eyes, and when we knocked on her door, she opened it like she'd been expecting us. Marie froze. I spoke first. "Are you Judith Benson?" She hesitated, then nodded. And just like that, we were inside. The air smelled like mothballs and old roses. On her mantel were pictures of children, none of them Marie. We sat across from her at a low coffee table, and I laid the journal down in front of her. "I think you know what this is," I said. She stared at it for a long time. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached forward, but she didn't open it. Instead, she looked at Marie and said softly, "You look like Clara." Marie didn't reply. So Judith began talking. She admitted to falsifying adoption records. She admitted to taking money. She admitted to telling Clara that the family she chose was unfit, and that if she didn't sign the paperwork, the baby would be taken by the state. But the most chilling part, she said she'd been ordered to do it by a man named Gregory Benson, our grandfather. Clara was supposed to disappear, and Marie was supposed to be forgotten. But she wasn't. She grew up. She found me, and she came back. I asked Judith why she never came forward. She said, because by the time I wanted to fix it, too much damage had been done, and I was a coward. Marie didn't cry. She just stood up, looked her in the eyes, and said, "I forgive you, but I will never forget." We walked out of that house in silence. That night, we stayed in a cheap motel off the highway. We didn't talk about the past, We didn't try to process it. We just sat side by side like siblings who had been through fire and were still standing. When I got home, I placed Clara's journal next to Dad's Bible on my shelf, the two books that shaped the story of my family without ever meeting. Two people, two heartbreaks, two paths that never crossed again, but whose children finally did. And in that quiet space between them, I found peace.